Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, more like Megalopolis. I made up this joke, by the way. I'm the first person to say this joke. This is Megalopolis.
Let's go. Drop it. Motherfucker go boom. Motherfucker go.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Megalopolis, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing? Are you currently on fire?
I am smoldering, but in a sexy way, not in a physically burning way. Thank you for pointing that out. I wanted to use this time to note that this week, LA was struck by a historic windstorm, which set off a truly horrific set of wildfires all over the area. But I'm fine. I am one of the lucky ones, so I want to say that I'm thankful for that. And I'm sending not only my thoughts to the affected people, but a few donations to relief organizations here and there in hopes that the people who need some help will get it. But I want to add, because it's been a really weird week, the weirdest part for me personally is from the minute the fire started, my brain just wanted to go, oh, this is normal. Natural disaster is normal. That's just what might happen on a random Tuesday. And I don't know if that's me coping, being fatalistic, or just being realistic, but here we are.
The times might be unprecedented, but also they're kind of precedented by now. They've been unprecedented for several years at this point.
Yeah.
And this is just the world now, I guess.
So is it healthy when it hits you, you go, oh yeah, this is the thing that hits everybody? Or is that just a sign of the deep sickness? Maybe both.
It's like a existential malaise setting in.
Yeah.
But hey, it should be a fun few years. See how it goes.
Yeah. We're going to keep podcasting through it. How are you doing?
Better than the people of Los Angeles. Obviously, our deepest condolences to anyone affected by the fires. And like Ian said, if you're looking to do some good, there are plenty of relief organizations out there that are doing a lot of great work. I don't have any similar tragedies, but we did have high winds in New England for extended period of time, and a tree fell on my deck.
Oh, geez.
Yeah,
that sucks.
The deck you just saw. You didn't get to sit on it because it was like 11 degrees.
It was too cold to go out there, but I did see that there was a tree near it. Did like the whole tree come down?
The whole tree came down, but luckily it just took out the back portion of the deck. So it's still like structurally stable. We could still like grill on it if we need to.
Okay.
But like it was a dead tree. When I went to move it, it just started falling apart. So then I didn't have to get the chainsaw out at least.
Oh, okay. I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, me and my wife Jamie cleaned it up in like half an hour.
Oh, wow.
The two of us just picked the tree up and pivoted it into the woods because we have woods at the back of our house.
We just sweep it under the leaves in the woods like that never happened.
Exactly. Yeah, so weather has been kind of a dickhead for both of us lately, but you certainly more so. I think you sent me the air quality index. Was it like 400?
We almost hit the max. I didn't even realize this. Air quality index on a bad day gets to 80 or 100 or something if it's super smoggy or whatever.
Yeah.
I saw it peak at about 440 something out of 500. So I was like, oh, we're going to complete this thing. We're going to get the high score. But I'm glad we didn't. And I'm glad I have air filters running in my apartment because that would have not been fun to breathe.
They got to make the chart go higher. If things keep going the way they are, we're going to break that 500 someday. Unless everyone just spontaneously combusts when it hit 500, you need to be able to go above it too.
Yeah, might have to double all the disaster charts just to make a little room.
But while you were sheltering in place, did you happen to watch anything the listeners might find interesting?
I did. I watched something quite interesting. It's a little movie called Small Things Like These.
A little movie called Small Things Like This?
A small movie like this. It just came out in November 2024, starring Cillian Murphy. He's also one of the producers on it. And this may be a hot take, but I think he's better in this kind of role than as J. Robert Oppenheimer. Although, when I think about it, both Oppenheimer and this, he plays troubled men who are trying to do the right thing. This one's a much smaller story, though. It's based on this 2022 novel by an Irish author named Claire Keegan, which I just randomly happened to read. Must have been shortly after it came out. Amazon just pushed it on me, and I clicked and said, okay, I'll check this thing out. And I'm glad I did. Then I heard about Cillian working on this thing, and it came out really good. I'm going to recommend it, but I'm going to warn people that it's a quiet movie. It's an indie movie. It's slow paced. It's about feelings and memories and relationships. Not a ton of plot, not a ton of action.
It's a bit of a downer too, isn't it?
It's a bit of a downer, although it's fairly positive by the end, so it doesn't totally wreck you. It's a Christmas movie, but as some people I saw describing it, it's almost an anti-Christmas Carol. So there's a genuinely good, sensitive man who is forced to reflect on his upbringing while external forces try to convince him to do the wrong thing. But he does good in the end, not to spoil it. But the movie is like the book. It has this very spare style. There's not a ton of dialogue. It's quiet, small little gestures. And I was left wondering if I hadn't known the story, would I have found it a little bit harder to grasp? And maybe I would have, but I ended up really liking it. So if you like Killian, if you like thoughtful dramas about Ireland in the 1980s, check it out.
That all sounds like things I enjoy. I have started the show Say Nothing, which is about Ireland during the Troubles.
Oh, okay.
But that's more of it's telling a bigger story than it sounds like small things like these tiny things.
Yeah.
It's trying to tell the little small things like these tiny things is, I believe, the full name of the movie. But I'm pretty sure you talked about the book on the podcast at some point in the past, but we can't quite pinpoint what episode it was.
I think it might have been Sunshine, which starred Killian, and maybe in the rounding up what people were working on was when said, oh, he's co-producing this film that's coming out.
Wouldn't it be weird if it was Chris Evans in Small Things Like These instead? He was also in Sunshine.
Yeah.
Can't picture that. Although he does look good in a cable knit sweater.
Yes, he would. Man, it's all cable knit sweaters. If you want to do some sweater shopping and some outfit planning, it's a good movie for that too.
Yeah, there should be like an Esquire spread that's like the fashion of Small Things Like These. Somehow I doubt it. The movie I wanted to talk about also got some fashionable outfits in it. I feel like red flannel, that lumberjack, the red and black lumberjack, as Biggie Smalls would say. One of the main characters in 2024's Strange Darling is wearing that throughout. And that's the movie I watched this week that I wanted to talk about because if I'm remembering correctly, it also made Adam Naiman's top 10 of 2024 list, or at least an honorable mention. And I apparently only talk about movies that are from Adam Naiman's top 10 of 2024 list now.
You're going down the list.
But what I liked about the movie, first of all, the two lead performances are fantastic. Willa Fitzgerald just has a true breakout performance in it. And then Kyle Gallner is her counterpart. They are the two leads. They have great chemistry together, absolutely electric. Even in scenes where they're individual, they're doing great acting.
Nice.
It's beautifully shot by Giovanni Ribisi, of all people, was the cinematographer making his debut.
Wow.
He was also a producer on the film. It's directed by a guy named J.T. Mullner. Very creatively, it's a 6-chapter story told out of order in a very interesting way that still somehow manages to not spoil things before they're germane.
Okay.
But that brings me to the issues I had with the movie. And one of them is not really the movie's fault. It's more the marketing department of the movie's fault. There was so much hubbub about go in blind. Don't know anything about this movie when you see it.
Okay.
Like you will not be prepared. And I was like 5 minutes in, I was like, I know what's going on. But I also got the vibe that like the filmmaker wasn't super concerned about hiding his twists either.
Oh, that wasn't the point of the movie, to keep you in the dark.
It was not. Yeah. But I feel like the marketing treated it like that was the point of the movie.
Okay.
So it kind of felt cheap. But then the movie does a lot of fun stuff with gender roles, traditional kind of gender assignments, and how that impacts women being safe when they're dating. But then there's a scene towards the end with two cops, and that's all I'll say. I think it kicks off the third act more or less, that reframed a lot of the gender conversations in the movie in a way I didn't really like. It became borderline like men's rightsy.
Oh.
Which I have no idea. I'm not familiar with other works from this director, but the rest of the movie was like so smartly written and had such clarity of its message that it really stands out as drastically worse than the rest of the movie scene.
Strange.
Yeah, darling. And I can't wrap my head around it. And I'm really curious if anyone else has seen Strange Darling and knows what I'm talking about. Feel free to email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Don't worry about spoiling anything for Ian because I checked the email box. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this scene because there's no way you don't know what scene I'm talking about. It's pretty obvious. And the movie was cruising for like 4 out of 5 stars for me, and that dropped it back down to like maybe 3.
That's disappointing. Like
Yeah.
I thought you were, the way you wound up to it, I was like, and then this really put it over the top with this killer scene that blew my mind. And you're like, the killer scene blew my vibe, but that's too bad.
It sure did. But I'd be remiss if because off mic we were talking about it and I made a point to mention the Bagel himself has a big role in this movie. Probably the only name actor that I would say so far. Willa Fitzgerald's been in some stuff, but this will be her breakout. But yeah, Ed Begley Jr., our boy from Spinal Tap and so many other things, just a comedy legend.
Yeah, good look. Fine drummer.
He was the one that spontaneously combusted, right?
That's right.
The drummers all died in fun and unique ways, but he was the original, I think.
Tall, blonde geek with glasses.
That is Ed Begley.
That's him.
Other folks might remember him from Arrested Development, playing a gentleman with alopecia.
Great in that. Super charming actor. I might have to see it for old Ed Begley.
Yeah, I'd recommend it. I know you get squeamish about horror. I would say it's much more of a thriller than a horror, so I think you can handle it.
Okay.
But there's a couple horror movies or thrillers that I've recommended to you, so you've got a backlog. You still got to watch Red Rooms.
Yeah, I'm working my nerve up to get to that one. I do want to check it out.
This one's, I would hesitate to call Strange Darling breezy, but it's not Red Rooms either. Like,
oh, okay.
It's not going to haunt you for days and days.
Well, that's good.
So speaking of haunting you for days and days, but not in the good way, let's get down to it. We're talking about a flop 50 years in the making, a generational flop, if you will, from one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's Megalopolis.
Yeah.
This fucking turkey that when we planned this episode was still available to be watched at home.
Yeah.
But that no longer seems to be the case.
Just another weird turn for a movie that had trouble getting distribution. And then it was like in buy or rent mode, I think, on various digital platforms. And then it came back off. And the rumor is I think Apple TV might be queuing up to have some exclusive digital on it. So keep an eye out. But right now, it's very hard to see this movie. Hopefully, by the time some people are listening to this, there'll be some clarity and people will find a way to watch it.
Yeah, apologies. We did not intend to cover a movie that you can't see, despite the fact that I still want to cover Strange Days. And it's one of the movies that I feel like after we're done describing it, people are going to want to see, just to be like, they must have missed something. That can't be what happens in that scene. But no, it is.
We're going to lay it all out. I remember when I heard about it and I was hopeful. I was like, oh, the haters want to hate, but I believe that Coppola, is onto something and his doubters don't get it. And maybe the movie's really strange, but there'll be something great and glorious about it for those who are willing to do the work. And no luck, really. I don't think it's that.
No, there is fun to be had while watching this movie, but it's almost entirely at the movie's expense.
I don't think I even had that kind of fun. I mean, I was enjoying some of it, but I was feeling bad. I was feeling worried for Mr. Coppola.
His mental state.
Mental state, which doesn't seem good. But then as I read more, I'm not sure if it was that. I don't know. We'll have to try to walk everyone down the path that we went on of watching this movie, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to just deal with it. It's a lot. It's a handful.
Yeah, the first time I watched this movie, it was very disorienting because I was 100% certain this movie would have its own head firmly inside of its ass. And it does. But I sat down thinking like, I'm going to watch an important movie or like a movie that the filmmaker thinks is important. And, it's going to be so reverent and grand. And then I was like, oh, this is insane. Like what the fuck? Shia LaBeouf has no eyebrows. There's the first lines of dialogue are literally like a fucking superhero TV cartoon. Like time stop.
Kind of shriek though. Time stop. I couldn't nail it, but I was trying to work on my Adam Driver scream.
You got to start from like a real baritone to get that kind of scratchiness because he's got a very deep voice naturally.
He does, but he has this sort of telltale, what do you call that? Squeak? I don't know. The way he squeaks out that first line of the movie, it sets the tone for the shit that you're in for because it's bad. And we could get lost going down pathways of just the weird little things like that. Freaky stuff that distracts you.
Weird little things like these, right? That was the name of the movie you brought?
Yeah, weird things like these. That's what Coppola should have called this one. And we could spend all our time on that, or we could spend all our time on just the bones of the movie. Where's the story? What is the story? Who are these characters?
Great question.
What are they trying to do? Will they do a single thing during the movie? There's so much to swallow. I feel stymied coming into it. When there's so much wrong with the movie, it's hard to even talk about it. And it's hard to talk about what does wrong mean because before I could see it, I couldn't conceive of what was wrong with it. Like you were just alluding to. Oh, it's going to be a little bit too pompous or too drawn out or too self-serious. And it is all those things, but it's also just
bananas.
Unhinged.
And not for nothing, the signs were all there. The production of this movie, if you can even call it that. I was not exaggerating when I said he's been working on this movie in some capacity for 50 years. The production of this movie is also insane. All the drama and the actors that came and went, the entire departments that were fired during filming,
right.
Or like departments where one person was fired and the rest of the department quit in solidarity. That happened several times.
Yeah.
Lawsuits.
There's so much going on, but it does help when you learn a little bit more about Coppola's entire long history, which I didn't know a lot about. Him founding American Zoetrope and making Zoetrope Studios and his goals over the years, and then his path to making this movie. I got a better understanding, and when we get to that, I'll throw out one of my two master theories of this movie. It made me feel better about the movie because it made me feel less bad about Francis Ford Coppola and the state that he might be operating in. It doesn't make it a better movie, but it makes what he was doing and the energy he put in and where it went, it makes all of that make more sense. Do you want to tell us about how this thing got made and maybe it'll start to clarify the picture?
Yeah. Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis is less a film and more an odyssey spanning nearly 5 decades of ambition, reinvention, and chaos. Announced in the late 70s, shortly after Apocalypse Now, Coppola envisioned Megalopolis as a modern-day Roman epic, a grand narrative of utopia and societal collapse set against the backdrop of a futuristic New York City. But like the city it sought to reimagine, the project was one of lofty ideals, delayed progress, and near catastrophic setbacks.
Oh, so close. They were almost catastrophic.
Coppola began assembling assembling the film in earnest in the early 1980s, producing hundreds of pages of notes and fragments.
In other words, the shooting script.
Over the decades, the project ebbed and flowed, with Coppola prioritizing other films like Bram Stoker's Dracula and The Rainmaker to climb out of financial ruin caused by earlier box office flops. By the early 2000s, Megalopolis seemed within reach. Coppola conducted table reads featuring acting legends like Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Leonardo DiCaprio. He even shot some second-unit footage in New York with cinematographer Ron Frick, capturing the city's energy before principal photography. Then 9/11 happened. With its themes of urban destruction eerily paralleling the attacks, Coppola shelved the project once more, stating, "History has come to my doorstep." The project resurfaced in 2019 as Coppola approached his 80th birthday. By selling a portion of his winery business for $650 million and borrowing $200 million against his equity, he was able to self-finance the film with a reported $120 million budget. Casting began in 2021 with names like Zendaya, Cate Blanchett, and Michelle Pfeiffer initially attached. One by one, they dropped out,
Sometimes the smartest kids are the dropouts.
replaced by a mix of established stars like Adam Driver and Lawrence Fishburne, and unexpected additions like Nathalie Emmanuel, Aubrey Plaza, and Shia LaBeouf. Filming began in November 2022 at Trilla Studios in Georgia, but it was anything but smooth. Coppola's old-school, freewheeling style clashed with modern production expectations. Reports described a chaotic set where the director's on-the-fly decisions left crew members frustrated and confused.
To be fair, so did his carefully considered decisions.
6-hour delays for experimental shots, erratic schedule changes, and Coppola's alleged marijuana use added to the turmoil. By December, he had fired most of the visual effects team, leading to further resignations across the art department. Despite Coppola's insistence that production stayed on track and under budget, insiders claimed costs ballooned to $136 million, nearly bankrupting the director.
Man, it's as if production woes were enough.
As if production woes weren't enough, Coppola faced allegations of inappropriate behavior on set. Extras accused him of unsolicited kisses and unprofessional conduct during a nightclub scene. Videos of the incidents surfaced online, sparking further controversy. Coppola denied the accusations, claiming his actions were misinterpreted as efforts to, quote, set the mood.
Sure, if the mood is a hostile work environment.
The first trailer dropped in August 2024, an unconventional piece framing Coppola as a misunderstood genius by fabricating negative quotes from critics about his earlier masterpieces. The stunt backfired, and Lionsgate was forced to pull the trailer, blaming a marketing consultant for the debacle.
It was an intern by the name of Dances Door Dopola.
Megalopolis finally hit theaters on September 27, 2024, running 138 minutes. The reviews were as polarizing as the film's journey. Rotten Tomatoes aggregated a 45% approval rating, with critics calling it everything from a fascinating artistic manifesto to a bloated, incoherent mess. Audience reactions were similarly divided, with a cinema score of D+. Comparisons ranged from Metropolis to Caligula, with some hailing Coppola's ambition and others lamenting his execution.
And still others calling for his execution.
Financially, the film was a disaster. It grossed just $13.9 million worldwide against its $136 million budget, solidifying its status as one of the year's biggest flops. Yet Lionsgate managed a small profit, as Coppola himself covered all production and marketing expenses. In hindsight, Megalopolis might echo the trajectory of Coppola's earlier films like Apocalypse Now, which were initially maligned before achieving cult status. But for now, it stands as a cautionary tale, a sprawling, flawed, and undeniably bold testament to a filmmaker who has always chased the impossible, consequences be damned.
You have to respect him for chasing his dream, for putting up his own money. He just did what he wanted to do. And unfortunately, even comparing it to Apocalypse Now, which is a tripped out movie with an insane production history, it has a story and characters that pull you in. It's gripping. It has plot logic. Things go from A to B to C, maybe not totally traditionally like the Godfather movies, which are very traditional, very grounded, very much movies that teach you about how people interact with each other. Especially young men growing up watching The Godfather, they learn how to act towards other people in the world by seeing these very nuanced, realistic portrayals of humans and family interactions and loyalty and all this stuff. And this movie is just alien robots reading cue cards to each other. It's like so far from human. It's very hard to see the same director doing both.
Yeah, The Godfather did teach me that if you're going to punch somebody, it's best to miss them by like 8 feet and they'll just be devastated. If you remember the scene where Sonny beats up his sister's husband.
Oh, yeah.
He whiffs every punch by like a good 3 feet. It's hilarious.
But they didn't care. I guess that's an example of Coppola not caring about realism, but in a way that we all forgave him for.
Yeah, and going off what you were saying pre the monologue about Coppola and his approach to to filmmaking and his career, I couldn't help but think about another director we talked about, not recently, but, not that long ago either. And a contemporary of Coppola's, which was Michael Cimino, famously made The Deer Hunter and then Heaven's Gate, and then was more or less blacklisted from Hollywood forever. And I also digested a lot of the same supplemental materials about Coppola and his career and his life ahead of recording this episode as you did. And the parallels were striking in the sense that if Cimino had made like one or two more hit movies before he made Heaven's Gate, I feel like their careers could have been so similar. I think Coppola just had a little more, like just enough goodwill to eke by on some, like One from the Heart is a huge failure in box office standards. And that was an American Zoetrope production that he also self-financed and he did go bankrupt from it.
Yeah, very similar story, just 40 years earlier.
But then he came back and he made Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was a hit and well-liked. And he made The Rainmaker, which was at least well-liked. I don't know how it did financially. I forgot to check. So he was able to work his way back into Hollywood's, if not good graces, at least reasonable graces. But Cimino he was given so much less rope because he only had one hit movie before he made his disaster.
I think you're right that Coppola, clearly a director with a ton of talent, but also got really lucky. Found something early on in adapting Mario Puzo, stuff that really hit home with him, that he was really well prepared as a person and a filmmaker to make those films, and then hooked up with an incredible set of actors and just made some of the greatest movies that Hollywood's ever put out. And that goes a long way. But he doesn't cover up the fact that he's a weird dude, and he indulged himself right away in Apocalypse Now and barely got out of that one alive.
Right. We're so close to talking about Apocalypse Now the same way we talk about Heaven's Gate. Like it's just by the hair of a nutsack. That movie could have easily been a huge disaster critically and commercially.
So all this talk leads to my main master theory about this movie, which is this movie is not about the movie. This movie is about the making of this movie. And Coppola got what he wanted because he got to make the movie the way he wanted to make the movie. He got to indulge in the process. He's so into process. When you see there's this very long form YouTube video from a channel called Be Kind Rewind that goes into Coppola's whole history and shows footage from him when he bought this studio lot in Hollywood in the 70s and formed Zoetrope Studios. And he had groups of kids in there that they were mentoring and brought in aging filmmakers from previous generations to help mentor his current filmmakers. He's very much about the vibes and the scene and like the making of the movie being his joy and not that much about the product. Unfortunately, with this movie, he was under no studio guidance whatsoever and no real responsibility to what the movie turned out to be. And I think the movie itself is secondary.
Yeah. And to expand upon that, movies are to a large degree commodities now. And he just comes from a time where that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And without a studio guiding his hand, he didn't have to make a movie that way.
Right.
And good for him. But at the same time, like, what does this movie's utter failure say about that? Is it going to inspire somebody else to do that their way? I don't see that happening, really. I think it almost had the opposite effect of like, oh, maybe like studio notes are a good thing, like a young filmmaker seeing what happened to him here. I wonder if it would almost give them a crisis of confidence.
I wonder if part of it's his age and like being less and less attached to what the world thinks about you. Because I feel like new filmmakers, the ones that succeed, have some combination of wanting to entertain, wanting to please people with what they put out, and wanting to break rules and try new things and explore, doing things different than the way people tell them they have to be done. And Coppola seems to just leaned into that latter part of just like, just going to do my stuff. And like you said, what did you say early in your thing? You're like, Coppola began assembling the film in earnest in the 80s, producing hundreds of pages of notes and fragments. And that's what this movie is. It's just notes and fragments. I pictured it without even knowing that background. I pictured, as I was watching this movie, that Coppola had this scrapbook just stuffed with little ideas, quotes he had taken from Stoic philosophers, lines of Shakespeare. And then he just started jamming them into the script kind of randomly. Like people will just say a quote in the middle of a scene and you're like, that's not what you guys were talking about. Like, why are you saying that?
My favorite example of this is when Dustin Hoffman is just like having an important conversation about, I think maybe killing someone, but then it's like raining outside. He goes, I can handle the lightning, but the thunder scares the shit out of me. And then the scene ends and I felt like they called cut and Dustin Hoffman just happened to say that. And they were like, fuck it, let's keep it in.
Yeah.
Or no one even realized that it wasn't part of the scene. And I have no idea if that's true, but that's just how it felt.
Part of the background on this movie, when you read about it, is that despite Coppola coming in with his overflowing folder of lines he wanted to jam in there, he did a lot of improvisation. They talked about the company of actors feeling like an experimental theater group, and they were submitting pages and working up whole new sections of scenes that didn't exist. But it's weird because for a movie that you're told that a lot of it's improv, it still feels overstuffed with quotes and lines that are wedged into scenes that don't even belong there.
Only those in a nightmare have the capability to praise the moonlight.
Oh, God. Is that something they actually said?
That's Cicero's wife says that to him when he wakes up in a cold sweat. One of the most bizarre lines, Catherine Hunter. character plays.
Yes.
Like, very decorated actor in her own right, but someone had to make her say that line. And Adam Driver did say that the making of this movie was one of his favorite creative expeditions he's ever been on. Like, it was one of his favorite movies to make.
Really?
But I can see how an actor would love making this movie because actors kind of love the smell of their own farts. And this is very much a fart smelling movie. So like, yeah, of course he likes it.
Yeah. You can see him just playing and experimenting. And sometimes it's him being silly and sometimes it's him being over dramatic. The scenes where he's on drugs and then later where he's been shot and he's wounded.
No.
He's going nuts, man. He's reveling in it. So it was fun for him. And I think that's why it was fun for Coppola. So that's why Coppola can sit down in front of panels of people who just watched the movie and are confused as fuck. Like, what are you doing? And he can just sit there and be smug and content. And like, we did our thing. We had our fun. Fuck you guys. That's what we were here for.
I did love the reports from the screening of this movie that took place in LA that Sean Fennessy and Amanda Dobbins of The Big Picture were at. I was listening to their episode about this movie.
Oh, okay.
It was Robert De Niro and Spike Lee and Francis Ford Coppola were doing like a panel before the movie.
Interesting.
And De Niro looked like he was falling asleep, except when he would occasionally rouse himself to say something like Donald Trump couldn't make this movie. And you know what, Robert? You're correct. I doubt he could. They also both seemed a little embarrassed, maybe because they knew what was coming. Like the Q&A took place before the movie, but theoretically they had both seen it already.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of unintentional laughs in this movie, which if you're the director, you certainly don't want to be sitting there and hearing that.
That would be hard. It's a tough watch. You know, I always say I warm up on second watch. I connect things that I couldn't connect the first time and I get more in sync with what the filmmakers are trying to do. And some of that happened here, but there's so much other shit in this movie that just confounds you and frustrates you and boggles your mind. And I liked it less the second time, I'm sorry to say.
Do you want to maybe go through the story so we can explain some of these baffling choices?
We're going to have to try, so here goes nothing. Caesar Catalina, played by Adam Driver, is an inventor with the ability to stop time, and also with dreams of revitalizing the corrupt and decaying city of New Rome. As head of New Rome's design authority, Caesar hopes to rebuild it into a utopian megalopolis, using his Nobel Prize-winning technology, the Megalon. But Caesar faces strong opposition from New Rome's mayor, Franklin Cicero, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who'd rather build a new casino. Meanwhile, the mayor's daughter, Julia, played by Nathalie Emmanuel, develops a strange connection to Caesar when she realizes she's the only person who's not affected when Caesar causes time to stop moving. So she applies for a job with Caesar, who hires her as an assistant. And later, over time, they draw closer and form a romance when Caesar realizes he can now only stop time with Julia's help.
Oh, man.
Time stop!
Time stop!
Yeah, you got the rhythm of it better than I did.
Yeah, because he really emphasizes the stop.
Time stop!
It reminds me of that internet famous video of like the LARPer who's just like, fireball, fireball. Like, why are you yelling what you're doing? Is that the only way you can do it?
And the scene, can we talk about that? We already said that sets the tone for terrible dialogue, for strange outbursts that throw you off track. And the whole scene throws you off track because before we know anything about this character, he's stepping out of his office window, creeping to the edge of the Chrysler building, threatening to jump off. What we're seeing is ostensibly a suicidal man, right? This is a man reckoning with, do I want to live? And he suddenly has the power to change his mind at the last second and stop himself from falling with his magic powers.
Also, why does stopping time stop him from falling?
I know. Yeah, that doesn't make sense either.
Like he's dangling over the edge, like he would have fallen. Yeah, whatever.
That's the thing. Yeah, he doesn't stop. That's the point. But in this scene, his foot stops and he pulls it back. But yeah, guess what? The movie is not about him being suicidal at all. It's about him actually being maybe too full of himself, too confident, imperturbable, master of everything.
The movie's certainly not about the magical ability to stop time because it happens so infrequently and inconsequentially for the rest of the movie that it almost makes you wonder why it's included at all.
It's one of the huge complaints. It seems like a superpower that would have to, of course, be part of the plot. Like he would use it to get an advantage over his adversaries or do his work or something. He uses it for nothing. Nothing except bonding with Julia when he finds out that she can see when he's fucking around with time and no one else notices because they all get stopped.
Let's be clear. Stopping time, like when you were a kid, you had these debates, I'm sure, and all the listeners too, about what's the best superpower. And I was always a proponent of stopping time as the best superpower. Maybe it speaks to my questionable moral character, but I was like, you need money, stop time, walk into a bank, take what you need. You know, if there's traffic, stop time, just drive on the opposite side of the road, get around it all.
Yeah.
I feel like he just uses it to get laid.
And sometimes to just ponder shit. He has a lot of pondering to do in his life. So when he needs more time to think about stuff, he stops time and goes, ooh.
He's a big thinker. He's got big ideas. But I sincerely believe that if you remove the stopping time from this movie, it changes nothing.
Yeah, they could have given given him like a favorite song that he likes to whistle, and then Julia could have accidentally found out that she loves whistling that same song, and that would have had the exact same effect on the movie of it's the thing by which the two romantic leads identify each other as meaningful to one another.
I have to be honest, I'm also glad that didn't happen. But you were coming up with something off the top of your head, so I'm gonna give you credit for that. But let's talk about Driver. This performance, like all performances in this movie, it's heavily hit and miss. Sometimes he has a vaguely Italian accent that I don't understand.
And sometimes Julia has a vaguely Brooklyn accent. Is that what I detected?
Yeah, Julie's from Brooklyn, but she's also like Nathalie Emmanuel, not a bad actor, but not like a powerhouse either. And she's British, kind of struggling to be American. And you're going to throw a Brooklyn accent at her on top. No wonder she abandons it like 3/4 of the time she's talking. There's like 3 or 4 scenes where it pops up randomly, and the rest of the movie is all
in the middle. Like it's not there when you introduce her. So you're like, okay, this is a character with a flat American accent. And then there's this other scene where all of a sudden she's talking funny. It's just another one of those things that wears on you.
Yeah. I was talking to some friends, shout out Craig and Matt, about some movie. I know Nicolas Cage was one of them. There's 2 actors. One of them was Nicolas Cage, and it was like, no matter how bad the rest of a movie is, it can't be fully bad if it's got Nick Cage in it, because he's going to be doing his thing, you know, giving it 110%.
Okay.
And my counter argument is that Adam Driver is the anti-Nick Cage.
Oh.
No matter how good he is in a movie, it can't be totally good because he's in it. That's no knock against him.
Sounds like one.
I'm not saying he brings the movies down. There's just something, I always feel like he's maybe acting in a different movie than all of his co-stars, and it makes it all stand out more, the incongruousness.
I'm trying to think of an example of that from his other movies, because this movie can't be compared to anything. I think he's doing what he's supposed to be doing in this movie, which is being a total wacko.
The exception is Logan Lucky, which is just a fantastic movie. Beginning to
okay.
end.
He doesn't bring that one down. That's good.
I don't think he brings it down. I don't know how to explain it. There's just something about, look at the movies he's been in lately. On paper, they all sound like smash hits, but then they all kind of sucked and did badly. Ferrari, 65, House of Gucci. I don't know if that bombed, but it wasn't a huge hit either. And also, he's in a wildly different movie than, for example, like Jared Leto in that movie, or Lady Gaga. I think there's something about, he has problems with tone matching, maybe, is what I'm drawing from this. Like, I'm coming up with this half-ass theory as I speak it into existence.
That's fine.
But yeah, I think maybe it's like he doesn't know how to match his co-star's tone.
Or they don't know how to keep up with him.
Yeah, he's a madman.
He's going nuts in this. Yeah, I know what you mean. This movie, like, he's crazy in scenes where you feel for him as an actor because the scene doesn't work. So he's trying some crazy things in the middle of it just to give it life, give the character some humanity that's otherwise like a philosophy robot.
No.
But then I think, as you pointed out somewhere, maybe we haven't got to the scene yet, the scenes where there's some romance, there's places where he warms up and you go, oh, he's a good actor and he can actually do human connection. And for a second, you feel like, oh, he and Julia are a couple and there's some real human warmth there, but it comes and goes quick.
Yeah, I don't think I put it in the notes. I think we were just talking. But there's particularly a scene in his weird clock tower loft, whatever the fuck you want to, where him and Julia are up late at night playing patty cake. And that's a scene that got clowned a decent amount in reviews of the movie, but like I bought him there.
Yeah.
And I bought their romance in that scene. The movie needed more quiet, sincere moments like that, and not these kind of aggrandizing, speechifying moments.
Yes, I'm with you on that. That scene was also goofy because they were doing a silly game of patty cake.
It felt largely improv too. Yeah. Like he just starts doing his own thing with his hands. He's like, I'm doing a solo. That was a funny line. That doesn't feel like a line Francis Ford Coppola would have written down.
No, but he felt like a human. Like they both felt like humans in that scene, and they otherwise feel so stilted and fake. Like we can jump to where they first meet when she comes to try to get hired by him, or first to apologize for sending him this nasty letter. And then
she sent him a letter the night before, but he's already read it. And this is the scene, where they have their first, like kind of a verbal sparring.
You can get what Coppola's trying to do, set up the romantic leads meeting and sparking and being a little bit testy with each other. And I think he was going for that old-timey 30s, 40s movie kind of banter where the guy and the gal, they can't say their real feelings. So they make a lot of generic pronouncements about, oh, a person who thinks this might be like this, don't you think? And because they can't say what they really mean, but it's so stilted. I don't know, they just don't talk like people. And it's punctuated by one of your favorite lines from the movie.
So go back to the club. We have to put a soundbite of that in.
Okay.
So go back to the club.
Also, think about the content of that scene, not just the performance of it. What is that scene accomplishing? Caesar basically tells Julia, you're not smart enough to talk to me.
Yeah.
And that's our hero. There's a lot of things in this movie where you're kind of like, I think the mayor might be right.
Yeah. That's why I felt like it had that old-timey Hollywood movie dynamic where the guy in the relationship is much older. He doesn't take the woman seriously. He demeans her. He mocks her. And she, by the end of the scene, proves that not only does she know some facts about jellyfish biology, but she reveals that she has seen him stop time, which is the thing that stops him in his tracks. And he goes, oh, you actually have a superpower that's similar to my superpower in this movie that's not at all about superpowers. And that's when he lets her in, so to speak.
So it's really not the content of her character. It's just that she has the same magical birth power that he does.
Kind of is, sadly. Yeah, the women are underdrawn. They're not the best characters.
I did see a piece of criticism on this movie, and I apologize that I can't recall who exactly wrote it. They theorized that because this movie started gestation in the mid-70s, and because Francis Ford Coppola, even up to his more contemporary works, has always had a really bad time writing women, that the female characters in this movie do feel like women from a bygone era, whereas the men are allowed to be contemporary. And that feels true. Because Wow Platinum, Aubrey Plaza, one of the only actors in the movie that seems to know what movie she's in. But she's very much playing like a film noir femme fatale.
She's extra sassy. She's extra funny. Like, she brings a great energy to the role, but the character is weird. And from the first scene, I didn't even get it. But, you know, Caesar and Wow are dating secretly on the side when the movie starts. And the first scene where we realize that, where we see the two of them together, is actually their breakup. But I didn't get that until second watch.
Yeah, it's subtle.
But at the end of the scene, she sees Jon Voight's Old Man Crassus on screen and starts rubbing her hands together like, oh, this is going to be my next conquest, because she's a striver. So should we talk about the likable villain in this movie?
Wow.
Mayor Cicero?
Oh, yeah. So Mayor Cicero, played by Giancarlo Esposito, very good actor, one of my boys. He's set up to be the villain because he says things like, people don't need a utopian future society. They need like an apartment. And Caesar goes, oh, we must consider the future. Sure. But at the root of it, Caesar is a developer trying to eminent domain like a bunch of poor people so he can build his fancy fucking spaceship house.
Parks and walkways and stadiums and things. And yeah, like Cicero's, they keep painting him as like the corrupt mayor, but he kind of says reasonable stuff like you just said, like, hey, the people need basic services, buddy.
And I understand like building a casino is shorthand for like, I've lived in enough Rust Belt cities to know that it doesn't actually help anyone.
Okay.
But it's like a go-to solution for mayors of struggling cities. Like, how can we bring some money in? I know, a casino. And those of us in the know who have lived in places like Buffalo and Springfield, Massachusetts, know it doesn't actually help, but it's not inherently evil.
Yeah, when you see the two of them together, it's almost hard to tell. Like, I couldn't get who was supposed to be good and who was supposed to be bad. Coppola is idolizing this pie-eyed architect, basically, to be the leader. And just the idea of architects as leaders to me has always seemed ridiculous. Like, oh, it's just about if you design a swoopy enough building, then life will be great for everybody. And that's pretty much as sophisticated as the...
That's not even the subtext of this movie. That's the text of this movie.
That's the literal text. Adam Driver is going to design the swoopiest fucking golden building you ever saw, and that's going to make life good compared to whatever's wrong with it right now, which they don't even go into.
Yeah, it seems like the big problem is wealth disparity, which Caesar's, if not a billionaire, part of a billionaire family, at least, with a highly paid government job, which raises questions of corruption of itself. And then he wants to tear down affordable housing. He keeps calling Cicero a slumlord because his apartment buildings aren't swoopy enough. But again, like the movie doesn't do any work to validate that claim.
No, it never wants to show you any reality. It never wants to connect any of its ideas to realities that you can actually grasp.
When was the last time you think Francis Ford Coppola's lived in a reality that you or I would recognize?
That might be the problem. You might be onto something.
You might not know how at this point.
He's taken his heroic idols out of Ayn Rand books, apparently.
Yeah.
I've never read them myself, but what I was reading about this movie is that the Caesar character is based on the heroes of both her famous novels.
Yeah, when I saw the trailer of this movie for the first time, I was like, is this a fucking Ayn Rand thing?
It kind of is, which is icky in itself.
It's not a feather in its cap at all.
Yeah, not terribly progressive or forward-minded of Coppola. And that's probably why, coming from where I'm coming from and just my view of the world, I don't want to idolize this architect who doesn't seem to be able to articulate the problems that he's solving. He's just kind of like, no, we just need parks and we need moving walkways and no one must stand in my way because only I understand how to do things. It's not that relatable.
You know how people love going to the airport? We should try to recreate that experience in everyday life where the walkways move.
That's like one piece of technology that they show that the Megalon enables is moving sidewalks. Wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, I feel like we didn't really talk much about Megalon outside of the synopsis. Just to clarify, Megalon is magic. It's like an infinity stone. It could do whatever it needs to in that moment. Apparently, it can make your dress invisible.
Right.
It could rebuild your face. You could make buildings out of it and produce electricity with it and make walkways that move. It's whatever it needs to. Yeah, it's whatever you need it to do.
And the one thing that Caesar, in this sort of public debate with the mayor, goes, if we build with the megalon, it's indestructible, so it leaves a legacy for future generations. And that's what people want, which is, first of all, I don't think that's what people want.
I think it's what Francis Ford Coppola wants, but
Maybe. That's true. That could be an insight to his psyche. But yeah, it's a big, what do you call those things in movies?
MacGuffin.
It's kind of a big MacGuffin. And then at the end of this act, they reveal, when does this happen?
I thought it was Act 2, but I could be mistaken. Where they reveal where it came from.
Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. I got distracted thinking about, there's some stuff about Caesar's dead wife in Act 1, and then it comes around in Act 2 and links to the megalon. So we'll get to that. But
Not even to keep harping on how old-fashioned Coppola is about storytelling, but the dead wife of the brilliant tortured architect is 90% of the movies from the 70s.
And it's got also, again, like really rough outlines of a storyline where the mayor used to be the DA and prosecuted Caesar, who was accused of killing his wife. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. And that's where Julia breaks down and decides to love Caesar, is when she follows him around town and sees him buy roses and take him to an apartment bedroom, and has this realization where she absolutely loses it with the idea that he still loves her. Oh my God, the man loves his dead wife. Like, she can't believe it. She breaks down. And I'm like, why? Because he had a human emotion? What world is this? What's supposed to be in the minds of these characters?
Yeah, loving your dead wife is normal and good, actually. Like, it shouldn't be surprising.
I guess it was supposed to be that he was such a Superman, Ubermensch, that he wasn't capable of that. Or maybe she believed what her dad thought about him killing the wife. I don't know. It was a lot of wasted time and weird imagery. And then they used that to throw in more like superpower stuff, where he goes into a room where his wife died, but he sees her, and he is Caesar, but he also sees her.
Heyo.
But he's carrying roses and they start levitating, and there's all this sort of mystical shit going on.
It's a very weird sequence.
Oh, that's where the moving statues, they're just driving around town, and there's these marble statues that start moving, and it's like, are they moving? Is this someone's hallucination?
That was striking imagery, but it didn't mean anything. It was like, wasn't it Lady Justice like collapsing? And
She collapses and faints and holds her head like.
It could have used a couple more days in the CGI rendering booth. It wasn't the best CGI I've ever seen, but sure, it's a little heavy handed, but like, it's an image that you remember. I didn't actually mind that part of it, but also I was like, what does that have to do with anything?
It's the stuff is just piling up on you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to swallow it all.
I need some Megalon to dig myself out of it, because a Megalon shovel would probably just do all the work for you.
I'm going to need a big shot of Megalon after this episode. Did we cover everything in the first act? Can we move on, possibly?
I don't know. And also, who gives a shit?
Okay.
Caesar's former mistress is a TV reporter named Wow Platinum, played by Aubrey Plaza. Wow is miffed at being dumped by Caesar, so she seduces New Rome's richest old man, Crassus, played by Jon Voigt. And Crassus proposes. At their wedding, Crassus's evil nephew, Claudio, played by Shia LaBeouf. Don't care if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, by the way. Don't even think about correcting it with a.
Okay. Sorry, I will not say anything.
Conspires with Wow to unveil a scandalous sex tape showing Caesar with an underage girl. Mayor Cicero arrests Caesar, but it's later proven that the tape was fake and the girl is an adult. Then Caesar starts to rebuild his shattered reputation by using his megalon to rebuild parts of New Rome. At the same time, in direct opposition to Caesar, Claudio now runs for office as a populist demagogue. Meanwhile, Julia has become pregnant, but her father, Mayor Cicero, is still opposed to her marrying Caesar. So much so that he offers Caesar dirt on Cicero's own past malfeasance in a failed attempt to coax Caesar to leave his daughter alone. Finally, Claudio's right-hand man hires a 12-year-old boy to shoot Caesar in the fucking head. Caesar survives the assassination attempt, but he's in bad shape, and only by grafting his shattered skull with megalon does he cling to a chance to recover. I had to spice it up and zhuzh it up in some spots. Could we also get a soundbite of no, 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 no?
We got to do the no. I mean, that's a normal reaction. Not to being shot. He doesn't say no when he's shot. He says it.
No, it's like when he's recovering.
When he's recovering. He's up and around. He's walking with a cane and a bandage.
Looking like the fucking Phantom of the Opera.
It's so fun. I mean, it's Driver going for it, so you kind of like it, but you kind of like laugh at it. And then I was like, well, what is he crying about? Is it just the brain damage or the pain, the wound is hurting him? Or is it supposed to be that he's freaking out about the circumstances that he's now in, which just, it's like a low point for him. He's wounded.
Yeah, the banks seized
Cut him off thanks to Wow's machinations with old man Crassus. It's hard to know. Hard to know.
I love we have Cicero, Claudio, Crassus, Caesar, and then the ladies get such important Roman names as Julia and Wow.
Wow is right. Wow is what you say a lot during this movie, not only when you're referring to Aubrey Plaza's character.
What are we to make of Crassus? Jon Voight's 86 years old. I want to just throw that out there.
That sounds like a line from the film when someone's giving a speech. Citizens, what are we to make?
What are we to make? Well, no one rid me of this old conservative nut job. So yeah, like he's kind of fun in this movie. I think
Yes.
I will give you credit for opening my eyes to this because I was fully prepared to just blindly hate Jon Voight because
Hate
of
on
who he
Voight,
is as a
yeah.
person. But you were like, he's actually killing it. And I agree. Where does that leave his character? Because his character is one of the heroes of the story, ostensibly, and is Caesar's benefactor. He's seems to have relatively honorable intentions, but then he's also fucked up all the time and marrying a woman more than 40 years his junior, which like maybe Coppola doesn't see that as a failure of moral character, but I do. And I think a lot of the other audience members do too. And it doesn't help that we already have this kind of prejudice against Jon Voight.
Yeah, I do think that he's, in the eyes of the movie, he's being a creepy old man at that point. I don't think that's supposed to be the noble part of him. I think Crassus might actually have the best character arc because he's the money man. He's old and doddering when we meet him. Like you said, he's drunk all the time. And in the end, he does the right thing. He identifies the evil people who are trying to manipulate him, and he redeems himself at the very end, which like nobody else does. The hero and the heroine.
We're going to have to talk at length about how he redeems himself.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that happens in the third act. Stick around for that one, folks,
Oh,
because
boy.
it's ridiculous, but it's maybe the most fun I had in the movie.
It's also one of the scenes that if I described it to you, you might be like, I don't think that's what actually happened. I have to go watch this movie. And you can't because they pulled it from all the streaming services.
You have to take our word for it.
And then his grandson, actually, it's not his son. His grandson is Claudio.
Or doesn't he call him a nephew, or is it just really his grandson?
Caesar's his nephew. I think Claudio's his grandson.
Oh, okay.
Who fucking cares? It's entirely possible that it changes at different points of the movie, just like Julia's accent. So Shia, certainly a complicated figure to talk about, even more so than Jon Voight, because while Jon Voight has backwards ass beliefs, Shia has done heinous things recently. But that being said, I've always found him captivating as an actor, especially when he's playing a shitheel, which I think is the only thing he can convincingly play.
He is a really captivating shitheel in this movie, I have to admit.
He's also, him and Aubrey Plaza seem to be having fun, which I can't say about any of the other actors.
Yes.
And seem to have realized at some point during production what movie they're in and decided to just go for it. And I think one thing you can never claim about Shia LaBeouf is that he doesn't go for it.
He's going for it constantly.
Where are his fucking eyebrows?
I wonder whose choice that was. Did he just show up on set and it's like, hey, Francis, no eyebrows. That's my thing I'm bringing to this production.
So he's apparently a big method actor.
Okay.
But also he feels like he gives the best performances when he's in conflict. That's why he got fired from Don't Worry, Darling. He was originally supposed to be Harry Styles' character in that movie. But just arguing with the director, his co-stars, trying to foster a sense of tension. And apparently he did it here too. Francis Ford Coppola mentioned in some interview that like Shia has such a confrontational acting style. Like he tried to sugarcoat it a little bit, but he was basically like he was a fucking dickhead the whole time. So I would not be surprised if he showed up with no eyebrows just to piss him off.
Just to fuck with everybody. But it works for the character. Yeah, I saw that Coppola quote where he was specifically saying like Shia's main goal is to make life difficult for the director, which is weird because he seems like he's going with the flow of this movie. Like before I read that quote, I had watched the movie once and I'm like, Shia was right in sync with Coppola and he's taking the direction and going bigger with it. But apparently it's not enough for Shia to just take the direction. He has to also stir up some shit. But you know what? It helped Coppola. Like it didn't hurt this movie. As bad as this movie is, Claudio makes it a little better because it's just a character with
personality. And
he has personality, he has life.
He's got pretty consistent motivation too, which is not something you could say about a lot of other characters. Like
that's true.
He walks a pretty straight line. He's jealous of Caesar. He wants to bring him down and he wants to wield power.
He wants money and power. And he wants Julia, which Caesar has. He wants the money and the admiration. And so
he's got 3 girlfriends and they're all his sisters, apparently.
Yeah, that part's a little icky. I don't know what they were going for there.
I will say it did eat away at my goodwill for Francis Ford Coppola to hear him say that he casted people like Voigt and Shia LaBeouf because he didn't want to make a quote unquote woke Hollywood movie. And just shut the fuck up, man.
That's boomer shit.
Yeah, that is real boomer shit. Get the fuck out of here. Like, you mean there's nobody else who could have played that role besides Jon Voigt? But he does kill it.
But that's the thing. We've actually already conceded to Coppola made a good decision on both those hires as much as
know.
we would have never hired those guys ourselves.
You couldn't see our boy Barry Keoghan as Claudio.
Yeah, he would have been fun.
He actually has a lot of the same energy as Barry's character from The Green Knight.
Yeah, menacing little guy running around.
Weird little menacing little freak. That's just Barry Keoghan. He's sort of a crazy person. Yeah. And then we barely touched on in the notes. This wedding goes on for 40 minutes. There's a concert from a virgin pop star who ends up not being a virgin. But then we even get a little follow-up on her story because after the news breaks that she's actually 23, we get a little montage of her being like a bad girl pop star now. And like,
yeah, she's reinvented herself.
From Vesta Sweetwater to whatever her name is when she's wearing all the leopard print.
Yeah.
But this movie didn't have to, like, I know there are people out there clamoring for the 4-hour Megalopolis, but this probably could have been a tight hour 50 without a lot of this nonsense.
There was a lot that should have gone on in that scene. That whole scene, that wedding scene is setting up to Caesar's public disgrace where Claudio gets the fake sex tape played on the screens to everybody. But what's happening to Caesar at the same time is like an instant subplot where Caesar's a troubled man.
He's having a fear and loathing moment.
Yeah, he's abusing drugs during this wedding before he's being attacked. This is just what he does for fun at the wedding is go in the back and get really high and trip out. And Adam Driver does a lot of funny flopping around in his drug-induced haze.
Yeah, he acts like a drugged out freak pretty well. I do give the movie a little credit. I think it sets up his little odyssey he goes on there by, he's clearly troubled by the interaction he has with his mom at the dinner. So I thought he was going to drown his sorrows. Well, you don't drown your sorrows with drugs. What do you snort your sorrows?
Set them on fire? I didn't even pick up on what his relationship with his mom was.
She's like a curmudgeon the whole time. Like she always seems a little jealous and a little contemptuous of him. She doesn't really say why.
Okay.
But he's clearly rattled after interacting with her for a few minutes. And I think,
oh, so that's why he gets high backstage.
maybe I'm trying to apply storytelling logic where it doesn't belong, but that was my takeaway.
And that was Talia Shire, right? The mom?
Yeah. Talia Shire, and her son also has a small role in this, Jason Schwartzman.
Yeah. It's a whole Coppola family reunion.
This might have the thin red line beat for the most Oscar nominated actors who get less than 3 minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of people that we're not even going to talk about or have time to. We'll try to recap at the end if we forgot anybody.
I put in like a rapid fire section in the last part of the synopsis where you could just be like, this person's also in the movie.
Yeah. So we name dropped Talia right there, but otherwise she doesn't need to be mentioned. And then when does the Soviet satellite crash onto New Rome?
Unclear.
It's in this section though. Like, I guess that's what digs him out of his scandal, right? He's been scandalized. He's been taken down a couple pegs on his social status. And then the city needs him. It's like a Superman plot. Oh, suddenly this Soviet satellite crashes down and blows up half of New York. And so they need somebody with something helpful, like maybe a megalon that would help them rebuild. And he's like, I can do that. So he sort of rebuilds his reputation that way, right?
Yeah, it's post-disgrace, pre-shooting.
Okay.
It's good storytelling to introduce problems and solve them in the same like 15-minute span of a movie, right?
Yeah.
That's good. That's how you should tell a story. And then this happened, but also it's fine. This happened, but he's good now. Don't worry about it.
There's a lot of also it's fine. But then also something else happens. When he gets too fine, after coming back from scandal, proving that the Megalon works, that's when Claudio gets fed up with him and says, will someone rid me of this troublesome cousin, right?
I think he says, no one rid me of this fucking cousin. You got to put the sauce on it.
So, sorry, I didn't have the Shia sauce. But that causes Claudio's right-hand man to hire a 12-year-old assassin.
And I think that is the scene where Shia LaBeouf yells into a megaphone, shut the fuck up. Somebody in the distance yelled, Caesar Catalina.
Oh, right. Yeah. He's rallying his people. He's like, I'm the guy. I'm the candidate. I'm the only one that can help the city.
We're going to make America great again. Oh, sorry. Wrong speech.
No, you're not wrong with that. Like his people wear red baseball caps in one of the less subtle, less oblique symbols in the movie.
Yeah. But then instead of just ignoring the one person championing Caesar, he screams at him and through a microphone and then stomps off. You'd think that'd be disqualifying behavior for a politician in America, but you'd be wrong.
You'd be so wrong on that.
Some might say you could even still hold the highest office after acting like that.
That sounds crazy to me, but we live in a crazy place, don't we?
We do.
So we told you Caesar gets shot. It's a pretty dramatic scene to have a genuine 12-year-old go, hi, I'm 12 years old. Please sign my book, mister. And then just fucking pull out the Glock right in the face.
And Caesar's like legitimately legitimately charming towards the kid too, which makes the moment work even more. He's at his best behavior and is being very gregarious and very welcoming to this kid. And you kind of have an idea where the scene's going to go, but you start to warm up to this character a little bit. And then the shot is both the film shot and the gun shot is also really well done because it happens suddenly. And whoever mixed the sound for that particular scene did a really good job because the gunshot is super loud and it comes out of nowhere. So it's very disorienting.
Like I knew it was coming and I was scared for it. I'm like, this is going to be loud and scared me. And it was loud and it did scare me. That's Coppola channeling some of his old school sort of Godfather gun violence abilities.
Now, the 12-year-old shooting might be my favorite scene in the movie, which is weird to say. But even like the kind of confusion and chaos immediately after the shooting is well done. Lawrence Fishburne's character, who's Caesar's driver and bodyguard, ostensibly. I got to stop saying ostensibly.
Works for me, ostensibly.
But he's not even really sure what happened, which feels more true to life than like somebody immediately springing to action and having the solution ready. He's still not sure if Caesar actually got shot or what's going on, and everyone's scrambling. It was just effective. And because it was well done, it felt out of place.
Yes, I agree. That was like vintage Coppola. That was effective, thrilling scenes where you suddenly care about what's happening to the people on screen. And then after that post-shooting stuff we already referred to, the crazy Caesar stumbling around, screaming, no, no, no. And then in the midst of this fever dream he's having while he's recovering and half his face is a glowing golden skull covered with megalon.
Like you do.
That's when he explains like to himself where the megalon comes from, right? Like he's not talking to anybody, right? That's just him recounting it in his mind.
I thought maybe,
it's just for us.
I thought maybe like Julia was in the hospital room with him, but it's clearly his internal thoughts because only he can know those things and he can't talk. So yeah, it's got to be just him kind of having fever dreams.
Yeah. And we learn after the suggestions that, did he kill his wife? No, is he innocent? Does he still love her? He settles it for us there. What happened was my wife was being jealous for no reason, and she took the car, and I was following her, and she drove off a bridge, and then I jumped in the water to save her. And all this is being illustrated with the craziest psychedelic shit you've ever seen on screen, body painted, day glow, people forming various visions, and then revealing that his wife was pregnant with twins with the paint that's on their bodies. And then he's like, in this moment of pure ridiculousness from this movie, he's like, as I tried to save her, I knew she was lost. But that's when I had the idea for the megalon. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like,
how did you create this magical material?
A magical building material came to him while he was swimming into a car wreck, trying to rescue his drowned wife and unborn children. What does that mean? How? Like, why?
Where are your priorities, man?
It suggested that the idea is infused with her spirit and the spirit of his unborn children. But, magic doesn't always need sensible explanations. But I don't know, it needs maybe something more sensible than what we got.
Yeah, certainly. That's one of the more baffling sequences in the movie. And so, I don't really have anything to add to it, unfortunately.
It takes the steam back out of you after you were like, shit, this is a good movie. I can get what's happening. There's rivalries between people here. There's getting each other shot. There's lives at stake. Suddenly, it goes back into this confused psychedelic slop. And you're like, oh, shit, this is a tough watch.
And the movie, there is an important scene that we skipped over, but the movie is still bending over backwards to remove any complicatedness from Caesar's character that would make him less than like a paragon of virtue. Because Cicero approaches him and says, hey, if you stop dating my daughter, you can have all this incriminating evidence on me that I made up. Like, we found your wife's body. We know you didn't kill her. Which weird way to it's like a reverse blackmail.
Yeah. It doesn't quite.
I don't know what his end game is. How does that work? How's that supposed to work?
You can blackmail me if only you stay away from my daughter. But like he not only offers up the incriminating evidence against himself, he says, I will support you privately and publicly. Because like first it was like Cicero was against Caesar because he didn't like his policies and he didn't want him to use the megalon to build Megalopolis. But now it's really the only thing I care about is stay away from my daughter. And it's like, why? We don't see anything.
Right.
We can't see any explanation about why this man would be so crazed. And Giancarlo Esposito plays it very sincere.
You believe that he's just concerned for his daughter.
He's just like, he's willing to do anything just to protect his daughter. But you're like, protect his daughter from what?
Right. It would have made more sense if he hadn't just revealed that he knew Adam Driver didn't kill his wife and wasn't dangerous. Like, if he thought maybe he really did it, then you'd have a logical explanation for his hesitance at letting his daughter be with him.
And the sex tape's been debunked. Like, everything that he could have held against Caesar before is now not even a problem. And he's not even worried about the city because he's like, I'll just support you. You can just build whatever shit, but just not my daughter, please. And it's like, actually, they love each other. Like, what's your problem, Dad?
And the Russian satellite thing, too, is another moment where the movie kind of removes its own stakes. You sent me a YouTube video from a creator called Filmento, who did basically a takedown video about Megalopolis, which isn't hard to do, but it was very well done and it had a lot of interesting points.
Yeah.
But one of the main ones was that, like, the struggle between Caesar wanting to build this futuristic megalon city and Cicero wanting to maintain the status quo and just refurbish the buildings they currently have goes out the window once the Russian satellite destroys the city.
Right.
Because he's like, we need to rebuild it anyway. There's no tension anymore.
Yeah, might as well let me throw all this free megalon over everything, which seems to be cheap and easy and makes glorious swoopy structures.
The movie doesn't seem to, like, I can't believe I'm about to say this about the guy who made The Godfather, but it doesn't understand basic storytelling.
No, I don't think it's attempting storytelling.
It's a lot of plot for a movie that's not attempting storytelling, though. We could spend the entire length of this episode talking about abandoned or underbaked plot lines.
Yeah, they're all just stuff that like Coppola's trotting out. He's just going through the pages of his scrapbook. And my other master theory for this movie is it's not a story, it's a display. It's like a diorama that he puts together. Nothing is anything specific. Everything in this movie is the idea of a thing. Caesar isn't really a guy, he's the idea of a guy. Megalopolis isn't a city, it's the idea of a city. And so it's just like putting all these pieces out and lighting them and filming them, but they're all symbolic and they never get filled in. So people don't feel real. The problems, what are the actual problems in New Rome? They're only very vaguely referred to. There's some corruption and some decay. And what is Caesar's solution? Moving sidewalks. I don't know. There's so little to cling to.
Give me one tangible, concrete example for how a swoopy building is going to, like, I know it's been said before that Megalopolis is just that meme of like society if, but the movie's doing it backwards. They're positing that if you build that city from the meme, society will just be great. But the meme is saying this is what society would look like if you made the changes to make it good.
Right.
They're working backwards.
He's putting the swoopy cart before the horse, and it doesn't really make any sense unless you've got some really childlike beliefs that somebody knows better and it's just like build a golden building and I'll be happy.
The creatives know better, which Caesar's a creative. He's just, and what is a film director if not the architect of our imagination?
Oh, goodness. That was well said.
I'm sure that's what Francis Ford Coppola pulled out of his ass when he was selling off his vineyard to make this movie. But also Caesar's concepts of like city planning is hilarious. He just stands on a beam and is like, we'll put a stadium there and park there. It's like, do you know what like the water situation is there? Do you know, is that a two-way street or a one-way street? You can't put a stadium on a one-way street. Like,
he learns all of those details. He keeps them to himself, but he's figured them all out by looking through a brass telescope through some colored lenses. And, you know, if you put the fuchsia lens in front of the brass telescope, you go, oh, that's a full-fledged geological survey.
That telescope is made of megalon.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I just made that up.
It's all symbols. They're floating on I-beams held in the air by nothing.
Yeah, what's above them keeping these things aloft?
It doesn't matter. None of it matters. It's just an idea of a movie. Speaking of that, should we try to
wrap up this idea? Yeah, let's do it.
The conniving Wow and Claudio attempt their final scheme to win Caesar back and or bring Caesar down, respectively. Together, they manipulate Crassus, and they succeed at taking full control of his bank. Then Claudio unleashes his mob upon the city to unseat both Caesar and Mayor Cicero. But just when Wow and Claudio think Crassus is defeated, he surprises them with a hidden bow and arrow. Firing his vengeful arrows, Crassus kills his duplicitous wife Wow and shoots his evil nephew/grandson in the ass. Then, as Claudio's violent red baseball cap wearing supporters attack City Hall, Caesar steps up and he calms the riders with an impassioned speech that wins them over. They end up stringing Claudio up by his heels. Now, after having converted Mayor Cicero and the wealthy Crassus to his side, Caesar is finally able to build out his utopian vision of Megalopolis. Caesar and Julia are now a happy family, along with her father Cicero and their new baby, who we suspect may also hold the power to stop time.
You know what that baby's first words were?
Time, stop.
I would also like to point out that the Conniving Wow is a great band name.
Yeah, Conniving Wow.
I'm going to steal that. I feel like the movie truly goes off the rails in this third act.
Pretty unhinged.
And it becomes a little more, it comes alive a little more. We get scenes like the Auntie Wow scene, which all I have to say about that one is wow.
Yes. Very uncomfortable.
She forces her nephew to perform cunnilingus on her while detailing her plans to take over the bank like a Bond villain.
Yes.
And also giving Claudio a haircut at the same time.
Right. That's part of her plan.
She's a multitasker.
She seduces him, lays out her plan, puts it into action. And it's pretty grotesque, but those two actors, like we said, are fully committed. I was like, at least I know what these characters want, and they're doing something to get it. So as much as that scene is a little bit hard to watch, I was like, okay, at least I can tell what's happening in this scene.
Yeah. No, I actually have no objections from a filmmaking standpoint and a storytelling standpoint to that scene. Only from a my eyes had to see that and my ears had to hear it standpoint. And then I believe the next scene is very stylishly shot where we have Aubrey Plaza in silhouette with some scissors, the scissors that she cut Claudio's hair with, clearly meant to portray like a puppet master, while Claudio goes to tell his granddad or uncle, TBD, hey, look, I cut my hair. Also, I want to be, and Crass has been trying to get Claudio into the business for a while and telling him like, you don't take it seriously. Look at your hair. Claudio's whole plan is I cut off my ponytail, make me CEO. And it almost works.
Yeah. Until Crassus reads the fine print and he's like, wait a minute, this contract is bullshit. And he loses it and he has a stroke.
No, he gets a little more Shakespearean than that. He goes, betrayal. What is he? He starts talking again. Like sometimes people talk normal in this movie and sometimes they talk like they're in a Shakespearean play. And he goes full Shakespearean and it's hilarious because he can't really sell it. But he has a stroke, I believe is what we're to surmise from that.
Yeah, or at least he's convincing everybody he's had a stroke.
Because then, when he enacts his revenge, he utters, with perfect diction, the line from this movie that maybe this one, maybe go back to the club. One of these two will be the one that will stand the test of time. Crassus says to Wow and Claudio, check out this boner I got. And then he pulls back his robe to reveal the smallest bow and arrow anyone's ever seen.
A tiny little, like, worthy of Cupid.
Not like Cupid from Valentine, but Cupid from Valentine's Day.
Right.
He shoots Wow with it, and not before you called out this line. I'll let you take the reins on this one.
Oh, yes. A secondary line, his little action star zinger as he kills her is, wow, you Wall Street slut, this is your closing bell.
Yeah.
Which is dumb. And it's also distracting because one of my qualms with this movie is it's not New York City. There may not be a Wall Street in this city. It's New Rome. And yet towards the end of the movie, Coppola throws all that out the door and he's like, it's just New York, you guys. I can't keep this up.
New Rome is also referred to as both a city and a country at times, depending on who's talking. But
check out this boner I got. That's a winner. That phrasing, that's special. Who would say that? You might say, check out my boner.
Check out this boner I got.
This boner that I got. Look what I got, a boner under the covers here.
My big qualm with this scene, and I got qualms, is an arrow shot by an 86-year-old man from this tiny bow and arrow would bounce harmlessly off Wow's breastplate and just like clank on the ground. Maybe if he shot it at Claudio's butt, it could
hurt him.
It could take hold, but it's just bouncing off Aubrey Plaza. There's no way he's getting the velocity necessary to bury that in her heart and kill her instantly.
Because this scene, they're back in their fully Roman garb. I feel like this is one of those scenes from an ancient myth where the bow is imbued with the power of Athena. So it's not about how literally big it is or how strong this old man is. Like those arrows are going through whatever he points them at, in my mind.
Stop justifying this. The bone arrow was tiny. Should have been a crossbow. That would have been more believable, but not as romantic because, that was his love and he shot her like Cupid.
Yeah, the art director would have not liked the way that blended in because they all have this cool bronze and black armor kind of thing going on that's very stylish.
Yeah. But then Claudio gets shot in the ass a couple times, but then he gets strung up by his legs and we don't really know what happens to him. His story's left open.
It's kind of a safe ending for him that they don't show him actually dead and dragged through the streets. He's just kind of alive.
It's implied. Yeah, I figured it was probably how it went down, but they didn't want to show it.
Yeah, it's a safe nod to Mussolini, but not too graphic of one. Then that same insane crowd is won over by Caesar in the most confusing, conceptual, blowhard, jackass speech you ever heard. His face is being projected onto a golden cloud. Like they've established these are your angry populists, rabble-rouser MAGA bros, and yet the most intellectual blowhard dickhead comes up there and lectures them, and they're all like, oh yeah, he's right. We like him now. We don't like our guy anymore. And his like winning line is, we're in need of a great debate about the future. Oh really? Like these people are demanding specific things like fix our slums. And they're like, oh no, actually, we should just talk about the future more. Like he's still putting off, there's no concrete solutions. He's not even defining the problem. He's just like, we need to talk about the future. And that's what we should focus on.
A lot of these people are mad at him specifically for knocking down their house.
Yes.
To build his, not even Megalopolis, but his concept for Megalopolis from earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
Like the little kind of demo he made, which I guess became his house.
Maybe. It's not
Unclear.
clear.
Yeah, far be it from me to side with the MAGA bros, but if you tore my fucking house down and then told me we need to have a great debate about the future, I'm going to fucking stab you.
Yeah, it's not plausible.
But wow, platinum is plausible.
Oh, are we plausible?
I regret that immediately.
Yeah, that's one of the big disappointments is that Coppola couldn't go any deeper and give us something like a real man who would I don't know.
Like a James Caan type.
I mean, in another era, maybe.
He was supposed to be Nush Berman, the Dustin Hoffman character.
Oh, no kidding.
It was supposed to be his last role, but he passed sadly before he could film his scenes.
But I couldn't help but thinking of Newt, of Matthew McConaughey rallying the regular folks outside the courthouse or whatever.
Baby, stop time, Newt.
Baby does stop time. There was a classic corny movie speech, but you could go with it. You could go, he said the things that kind of stirs you and go, oh, maybe he's right. Maybe we should follow him. But this was not even close.
Even like Bill Pullman from Independence Day. Get him out there.
Yeah, people like that because it's cheesy, but it's also it works if you're willing to buy into it. There's nothing to buy into in this speech.
He could just give us the same speech from Independence Day and I'd be like, yeah.
You should have cribbed that.
No reference to aliens anywhere else in the movie. That's Megalopolis, man.
Yeah.
We were very stressed about this episode.
I'm exhausted.
How do we talk about this movie? And I think we just make fun of it.
Yeah, we maintained a higher spirit. I feel good about that. I feel a little bit giddy. I feel a little bit loopy from the effort. But unlike last week where I was Borderlands is just making me feel bitter.
You say blast week instead of last week.
Sorry. Unlike Blast Week when Borderlands bummed me out. This movie, we had fun talking about it.
Yeah, and I will say this. I watched Borderlands 2.5 times last week for the pod, not given it a moment's thought since then.
Right.
And don't know that I ever will again for the rest of my life. Give that movie more than a fleeting consideration.
That's fair.
I cannot say the same for Megalopolis. There is just enough absolute insanity in this movie where I'm like, what did he mean by this? What was he trying to say?
God, I hope it doesn't stick with me. I hope I don't ponder those things anymore. My first watch of this movie, I was flabbergasted. I was texting you this poor man, Francis Coppola, is
Yeah, you were legit worried.
I'm there's no other explanation for this movie but moderate to severe dementia. And I've changed my mind because I can now see another explanation. But that second watch, I had to fight to keep it on, to not turn it off and walk out of the room. I was getting more and more mad at the movie because there's some things there, but there's so many things that are just, I don't know, do better. He's done. What can I say? I can't be like Coppola, do better next time.
No, this is it.
This is it for him, right?
Yeah, this has got to be his swan song. Where do you go from here?
I don't know.
But it's just like Teresa Cicero says, only those in a nightmare have the ability to praise the moonlight.
To me, that means that you and I should be praising the moonlight right now because...
A fucking nightmare. Let's hear where some of these people went after this movie. Or this movie came out 3 months ago. So let's talk about some of the people involved in this movie.
Okay, sure.
I'm not sure you guys need me to give a retrospective on Francis Ford Coppola's career. We certainly don't have enough time to do an exhaustive one. I will say he hasn't made a movie that was a financial success since 1992 with Bram Stoker's Dracula. And this is also his first movie in 13 years since 2011's Twixt. He did talk about the fact that since pretty much The Rainmaker, he's been making movies just to stay sharp and remember how to make them. He wasn't really making movies that he thought were going to change the world like this one. More so just trying to keep his skills sharp. I think he used the phrasing, remember who he is as a filmmaker.
Okay.
I haven't seen any of them, but I do really like The Rainmaker. I think that's a great movie.
I never saw that one. Maybe I'll have to go back and watch that to get the taste of this out of my mouth.
Yeah, he was in his hired gun phase there and it feels like it, but not in a bad way. It's a late 90s legal thriller and it's well done.
Okay.
Early Matt Damon performance. That was pretty good. I don't think I'm speaking out of school when I say that Adam Driver's had a tough couple of years at the box office. His last box office success was 2019's Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, a movie I absolutely loathe. And House of Gucci came close, which just barely doubled its budget. So it might not have lost much money, but it certainly didn't make much money.
Okay.
And then he's had Annette, which is batshit crazy. The Last Duel, 65, and Ferrari all lost money. And he had White Noise, which didn't get a theatrical release, but just based on kind of Netflix's algorithm, I'm assuming it was a dud because it only recommended it to people for a week and then it gave up on trying to make it a thing.
That's always the clue.
Yeah, whereas if you look at a movie like Carry On, it's been on the Netflix homepage since the day it came out as you would love this.
Yeah, they're milking it. That's a sign.
Watch
that
Carry
it's
On.
working.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happened to Mank. They just quietly buried it right after it came out because nobody was watching it.
I guess we're going to have to do a bunch more Driver in our future.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about with him, but he does have some cool stuff on the horizon. He's going to be in the film from Jim Jarmusch, who he's previously worked with on The Dead Don't Die and maybe something else as well, but called Father, Mother, Sister, Brother. That's also one we talked about last week because Cate Blanchett's in that as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm very excited for this one. My boy, Flushing Queens' own James Gray is making a Russian mob thriller with Adam Driver, Jeremy Strong, and Anne Hathaway called Paper Tiger.
Ooh.
And I will be there in the theater watching that.
Yeah.
He's also rumored to be playing young Neil McCauley in Heat 2, which is really happening apparently.
Okay. Interesting.
I left Heat 2 on the nightstand for you in case you wanted to read it when you were at my house, but I don't know if you had time.
I did not pick that up, but I spotted it down there. Did you read it?
No, I bought it with all intentions to read. I hear it's not bad. Our parasocial friend Chris Ryan said it was pretty good.
Okay.
So I'll try to give it a chance eventually. That was one of my New Year's resolutions, was to like actually read more of the books I buy.
That's always a wholesome thing to attempt to do.
It's tough to find the hours, but also he looks nothing like Robert De Niro. I don't know how they're going to pull off young Robert De Niro for Adam Driver, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then he's also attached to Terry Gilliam's comedy/fantasy movie, The Carnival at the End of Days. If that gets made, I will eat a sock. I don't know. It sounds made up. Terry Gilliam can never get a fucking movie off the ground.
That would be weird if Terry Gilliam made a movie at this point.
Yeah. It's crazy to me that he was in Monty Python because all his movies are like dystopian sci-fi. But Giancarlo Esposito, I wanted to call him out for being maybe the hardest working man in show business. So he's been on shows. These are not movies. These are shows, which have a longer production cycle. Better Call Saul. This is all just stuff from the last 5-6 years.
Right.
Better Call Saul, Godfather of Harlem, The Mandalorian, The Boys, Kaleidoscope, The Gentleman, Parish, The Residents, and he'll be in season 2 of Poker Face.
Wow.
In 2024, he was also in Abigail, Maxine, and Please Don't Feed the Children. He's also got a role in Captain America, Brave New World. He's not playing the Red Hulk. That's Harrison Ford.
Okay.
He's also in The Electric State, The Long Home, and The Prince. So this man must not ever sleep or take a vacation.
He's in his prime. I mean, he's an elder statesman almost. I don't know how old he is, but he's gotten to a level where like he is in demand and he's like, I am going to create some generational wealth for my family. Good for him.
Yeah, I feel like he was that guy for the first 25 plus years of his career. I remember seeing him in stuff like The Cotton Club.
Okay.
Then I guess it was probably Breaking Bad that really was like his breakout role and
Sure.
Made him a very popular household name. But he's fucking fantastic. He's also the bad guy in the newest Far Cry game, which I thought was cool. Because it's not even just his voice, it also looks like him.
I remember that. I started that game and I didn't get that far, but I'm like, that's Giancarlo on the cover.
It's one of my least favorite Far Cry games, but it's no fault of Giancarlo's. He's great.
Love him.
Nathalie Emmanuel she's a fixture in the Fast series by this point. I think she appeared in the 7th one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I am uneducated on Nathalie Emmanuel. I only know her from Game of Thrones, and I'm not sure I recognized her from anything else.
Yeah, Game of Thrones is definitely her breakout. She was also in Arthur the King and The Killer in 2024, not the Fincher one. There was another movie called The Killer.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
No, I don't think a lot of people did. She'll be doing a voice role in Unsinkable. She'll be in Fast X Part 2, of course. She's starring as Sharon Ben in Eubank, and she'll be in The Killer's TV series, which I think is a TV show made from the movie The Killer that nobody saw. Somebody must have saw it if they're greenlighting it.
That sounds like a great idea.
And then Aubrey Plaza, she was just in Agatha All Along.
Oh, okay.
She had a voice role in Monsters at Work and Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. That was the animated Scott Pilgrim show that was just released. She was really good in season 2 of White Lotus, and she also appeared in the Guy Ritchie spy thriller Operation Fortune Rue de Guerre.
I meant to watch that.
And I think she was also in a movie called My Old Ass this year, which got good reviews. I brought one of her movies to Show and Tell not long ago. Emily the Criminal. I brought that to Show and Tell not too long ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Somebody who gets into like a stolen goods ring.
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, solid little thriller. She's got 4 projects in pre-production, including Olga Dies Dreaming, a TV series. She's the titular Olga, and Honey Don't in post-production. And also wanted a quick aside, condolences to her. She's recently had a terrible tragedy.
Yeah, very sad. Heart goes out to her.
She's from Middletown, Delaware, which I actually have family in Middletown, Delaware. And she's like the pride of Middletown, Delaware. They go crazy for her there.
Oh, nice.
Even though I think in all the interviews she gives, she's like, yeah, it's the most boring place on earth. Would you like to hear what we're covering next week?
Oh my gosh, I actually know this time. I've watched the movie once.
This is the second week in a row. You've watched, I think, third week in a row, you've watched the movie the first time before I watched it, which is rare.
I'm getting ahead.
It's because you can't leave your house.
There's that. There's the clouds of smoke outside my door. And then there's also, we set a very ambitious schedule for the month of January. There's 5 Wednesdays. We're trying to fill them all with movies. And so I'm like, I better just get on the ball or I'm going to slip up and not keep up with these things.
We've been doing what I like to call the every other week schedule for a while, which is try to do every other week, but maybe we'll miss a week here and there. And then we went straight to 5 straight weeks.
Yeah.
Of like new movies too. And they're all fucking 2 hours and 20 minutes long for some god awful
They're
reason.
so long. That's one of our favorite things to complain about, but it's really biting us in the ass this time because it's like, okay, I get that Megalopolis is super long. It's the man's epic creation. He's worked on it for 50 years. Fucking Argyle is a light.
I think you just said it. That was the first time we actually said the movie.
Oh, yeah. That's what we're doing next week is Argyle.
It's Argyle.
It's action comedy. It's silly. Why does it have to be 2 hours and 20 minutes? It's not. We'll talk about it when we get to it. What it thinks it is and what it thinks it's capable of is very different from maybe what it achieved.
Look, I like Sam Rockwell quite a bit. One of my favorite actors.
I love him too.
Bryce Dallas Howard is that's Mother.
She's a doll.
She's a great actor. Also, I find her very attractive. Yeah, there's a lot on paper to like about it, but it was just absolutely savaged when it came out. And you went a little softer on it in your initial review of it, but I'm really curious to see where I land.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where you land too and where we both land after a couple watches and a lot of studious thinking on it.
Oh, is it a movie that requires a lot of studious thinking?
No, thank God. It's not like Megalopolis. There's no big ideas in it. There's just some silly action happening.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast if you can. We appreciate it.
We do.
Helps new listeners find the pod. You can follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. We're also on Blue Sky, BlastZonePod.blue, whatever the fuck that thing is.
Whatever that is.
I should learn before next time, but also I think it's just a thing I do now. You can email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Don't forget to email me if you saw Strange Darling and want to talk about it, because I have qualms. And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
Drop it.